The moment my brother-in-law turned my son's backpack upside down and my mother-in-law's emerald brooch struck the patio tiles, he smiled like he had finally proved something. He thought he had exposed a thief. What he had actually done was end 19 years of silence, uncover a fraud worth millions, and place the future of his beloved Marina in the hands of the man he had just shoved into a glass door. Welcome back to Raw Family Reckoning. Get comfortable because everyone in this story had several chances to choose decency. 2 people chose calculation instead. My name is Daniel Cross. I am 51 years old. I live outside Charleston, South Carolina, and I run a regional cold storage company that moves seafood, produce, and medicine across 6 states without losing an hour or a degree. Cross Atlantic Logistics started with 1 refrigerated truck, a borrowed warehouse, and a wife who believed in me before my own reflection did. Today, we employ 74 people and operate 4 distribution centers. I am proud of the company, but it is not the best thing I built. The best thing in my life sits around my kitchen table every night and argues about homework, screen time, and who finished the orange juice. My wife, Claire, is 46. She teaches music at a public middle school and can silence a room of 80 children by lifting 1 eyebrow. We have been married 19 years. She still leaves notes in my lunch when she thinks I am working too hard, and I still take the long way home when magnolias are blooming because she likes driving with the windows down. Our son Noah is 14. We adopted him when he was 6 after he spent 2 years moving through temporary placements. He is quiet until he trusts you, brilliant with machines, and incapable of walking past a damaged bicycle without trying to repair it. Our daughter Ruby is 11, biological, loud, fearless, and convinced every family discussion improves when she brings snacks. Claire and I never divided them into adopted and biological. We had 2 children, full stop. Noah chose my last name at his adoption hearing and practiced writing it for weeks beforehand. I kept the first page where he wrote Noah Cross in crooked blue letters. It sits in my office safe beside company documents worth more money but nowhere near as much. Claire's older brother Garrett Vaughn never accepted that simple truth. Garrett was 54, handsome, in a polished, weathered way, and owned Harbor Light Marina north of Mount Pleasant. He wore boat shoes to funerals, called every employee kid, and had the exhausting confidence of a man who believed ownership made him an expert on everything. His wife Serena was quieter but sharper. She remembered every slight, real or imagined, and stored them like silverware for the right dinner. Their son Chase was 15, 1 year older than Noah. Chase could be kind when his parents were not watching. Around Garrett, he became louder, crueler, and desperate to perform whatever version of strength his father rewarded. For years, Garrett treated me like a useful accident Claire had married. When my company was young, he asked whether I still drove that little freezer truck. After we expanded, he told people Claire's family money had rescued me. I corrected him twice. Then I stopped because arguing with a man committed to misunderstanding you only gives him new material. The truth was almost the reverse. Harbor Light Marina stood on land owned by Blue Heron Holdings, a company I controlled. 12 years earlier, Garrett's original lender had refused to refinance the failing property. Claire begged me to help because the marina had belonged to their late father. I bought the land, guaranteed the equipment loan, and leased everything back to Garrett below market rate. Garrett knew Blue Heron owned the land, but he believed Claire controlled Blue Heron through family inheritance. Claire let him believe it. She thought the truth would humiliate him and destroy what remained of their relationship. I agreed to stay invisible because loving my wife sometimes meant allowing her brother to thank the wrong person. The arrangement grew. When storms damaged the docks, Blue Heron paid. When insurance premiums jumped, I covered the difference. When Garrett fell behind on fuel deliveries, money moved through Claire and he assumed his little sister had reached into some private family account. He never asked where the account came from. Gratitude rarely investigates itself. I did not need praise. I needed peace. Claire loved her mother Evelyn Vaughn, and Evelyn's health had become fragile after a stroke. Family gatherings mattered to her, so I absorbed Garrett's little remarks, Serena's careful exclusions, and the way Chase repeated whatever language floated through their house. I told myself grown men could survive being underestimated. That belief ended on Evelyn's 75th birthday. She hosted the celebration at her old river house on Wadmalaw Island, a white wooden place wrapped in live oaks and Spanish moss. 3 generations came. There were folding tables on the lawn, oysters roasting over sheet metal, cousins carrying lemonade, and enough music drifting from the porch to make the river seem like part of the party. Evelyn wore a pale blue dress and the emerald brooch her husband had given her on their 30th anniversary. It was not the most expensive thing she owned, but it was the last gift he chose before cancer took him. She touched it whenever someone mentioned him. Claire noticed. So did Serena. I remember that now. The afternoon began beautifully. Ruby chased cousins with a water pistol. Noah helped Evelyn's neighbor repair a broken ice machine without being asked. I stood near the oyster pit talking with two suppliers from my company who had known Claire's family for years. Garrett moved through the crowd like a mayor inspecting a district he believed he owned. Around 4, Evelyn went inside to rest. 20 minutes later, Serena stepped onto the porch and announced that the emerald brooch was missing. The music lowered. Conversations stopped in pieces. Evelyn looked confused, then frightened, not because of the money but because grief had just been stolen away from her chest. Everyone began searching. Claire checked the bedroom and bathroom. Cousins looked beneath chairs. Garrett closed the side gate and said nobody should leave until the brooch was found. His voice was calm, authoritative, almost rehearsed. Noah stood beside me holding 2 paper cups, and I felt his shoulders tighten before anyone said his name. Serena said she had seen Noah near Evelyn's bedroom. That was true. Evelyn had asked him to fix the clasp on a small music box. Noah explained that immediately. Garrett asked why he looked nervous. Noah said because everyone was staring at him. Garrett smiled without warmth and said innocent people did not mind simple questions. I stepped forward and told Garrett the search could continue without interrogating a child. He raised both hands as if I were the one escalating things. Then Chase said Noah had been carrying his backpack inside. That was also true. Noah kept his tools in it. Facts become dangerous when arranged by people who already know the conclusion. Garrett asked Noah to open the bag. Noah looked at me. I said no. Not because I believed there was something inside, but because a 14-year-old should not have to prove innocence to adults who had already decided his history made him suspicious. Garrett called my refusal dramatic. Serena said we were making everyone uncomfortable. Then Garrett grabbed the backpack from the bench before I could reach it. He unzipped every pocket and turned it upside down over the patio. Screwdrivers, wires, a paperback novel, 2 granola bars, and a folded geometry worksheet scattered across the tiles. The emerald brooch fell last. It hit the stone with a sharp metallic sound that silenced the entire yard. Garrett looked at Noah, then at the family. His expression was not surprise. It was satisfaction carefully disguised as disappointment. I knew bringing a foster kid into this family would eventually cost us, he said. Some habits come from before people rescue you. Noah's face emptied in the way children's faces do when humiliation becomes too large for tears. Claire moved first. She placed herself between Noah and her brother and told Garrett to take the sentence back. Serena said Claire was protecting a thief because she was ashamed to admit the adoption had been a mistake. Ruby screamed that Noah had not taken anything. Chase looked at the ground. I picked up the brooch and handed it to Evelyn. Then I knelt, gathered Noah's tools, and placed them back in his bag. I did it slowly because my hands were shaking, and I refused to let Garrett see it. When I stood, I told him he would never speak to my son that way again. Garrett stepped close enough for me to smell beer and cigar smoke. He said I had always been sensitive because Noah was not really mine. I answered that fatherhood was measured by what a man protected, not what his blood produced. He laughed, placed both hands on my chest, and shoved me backward into the glass patio door. The glass did not break, but the frame cut my shoulder, and the impact knocked a tray from a nearby table. Plates crashed. Ruby cried out. Claire reached me while 2 uncles pulled Garrett back. Serena shouted that I had threatened her family. Garrett kept saying he was protecting his mother from people who did not belong. I touched the blood on my shoulder, looked at Noah, and saw him trying not to cry because he thought my injury was somehow his fault. That was the moment 19 years of peacekeeping ended. Not when Garrett shoved me, not when Serena lied, when my son apologized with his eyes for being the target they had chosen. I did not hit Garrett. I did not shout. I said, "You have until tomorrow morning to tell the truth." He asked what truth I meant. I looked at Chase. The boy flinched. Then I told Claire to gather our children. We walked out while the party remained frozen behind us. The drive home took 43 minutes. Ruby held Noah's hand in the back seat. Claire pressed a towel against my shoulder. Nobody spoke until we crossed the Stono River. Then Noah asked whether I believed him. I pulled into an empty church parking lot because that question deserved more than an answer delivered through a rearview mirror. I turned around and looked directly at him. "I believed you before the bag opened," I said. "I believe you now." Nothing Garrett found changes who you are. It only changes what I am going to do about him. Noah nodded once, but his mouth trembled. Ruby climbed across the seat and hugged him hard enough to make them both complain. At home, Claire cleaned the cut on my shoulder while the children ate grilled cheese in the den. She was furious, but beneath the fury was something heavier. Garrett was her brother. Serena had been her bridesmaid. Evelyn's birthday had become a courtroom, and the child on trial had been the son Claire had fought to bring home. I should have stopped this years ago, she said. I knew what she meant. The jokes about Noah's real family, the separate gifts at Christmas, the way Garrett praised Ruby for looking like Claire while asking Noah whether he remembered his original last name. We had corrected each incident, but we had never made the cost permanent. I told Claire none of this was her fault, but our silence was ours. We had kept paying for family peace while Garrett spent that peace teaching his son who deserved respect. Claire cried, then quietly and angrily. I held her until the children called us in because the television had stopped working. After Noah and Ruby went to bed, I entered my home office and opened the security application for Evelyn's river house. 3 months earlier, I had paid to install exterior cameras after tools disappeared from the shed. Garrett had complained that cameras made the property feel commercial. Fortunately, Evelyn had ignored him. The patio camera showed most of the party but not the bedroom hallway. I moved through the timeline. Serena entering the house at 341, Noah entering at 347, Noah leaving at 353, Serena leaving at 402. Nothing conclusive. Then I remembered the service camera over the kitchen door angled toward the back hallway. At 358, Serena appeared carrying a linen napkin. She stopped beside the bench where Noah's backpack rested, looked toward the yard, and crouched. Her hand entered the open side pocket. When she stood, the napkin was empty. She walked away without looking back. The camera did not show the brooch itself, but it showed enough. Claire watched the clip twice. The second time, she noticed Chase standing in the kitchen doorway. He saw his mother kneel beside the bag. He did not stop her. He did not leave. He simply backed away. That explained his face when Garrett demanded the search. The boy had not planted the brooch, but he had known. I called Renee Dalton, my attorney, even though it was after 10. Renee had handled my leases acquisitions and one ugly insurance dispute. She had a talent for hearing emotion without mistaking it for evidence. I sent her the video photographs of my shoulder and the names of 12 witnesses. Her first instruction was to preserve the original files in 3 places. Her second was to visit urgent care before the cut closed. Her third was not to contact Garrett. Men who think they have won talk too much, she said. Give him room. I followed all 3 instructions. I did all 3 without argument. At urgent care, a nurse cleaned the wound and documented bruising across my shoulder blade. Claire sat beside me, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles turned white. On the drive home, she said Garrett had called 6 times. Serena had sent messages accusing us of stealing Evelyn away from her own birthday. I asked whether Claire wanted to answer. She stared through the windshield and said no. For 19 years, she had been the bridge between Garrett and consequences. That night, the bridge closed. I did not tell her to do it. I watched her decide for herself, and that mattered more than any revenge I could design. The next morning, I called Blue Heron Holdings. Technically, that meant calling Marisol Vega, the property manager who had supervised Harbor Light's lease for 8 years. I instructed her to suspend every discretionary repair advance and subsidy, but not basic safety services. I wanted Garrett accountable, not customers endangered. She had never heard me sound this final. Then I called Harbor National Bank. Garrett's equipment loan required quarterly certification that the Marina remained current on taxes, payroll, and vendor obligations. My accountants had quietly covered shortages twice that year. I notified the bank that Blue Heron would no longer cure defaults and requested a formal review of every certification Garrett had submitted. The banker became very quiet. Quiet bankers are rarely good news for borrowers. He asked whether I believed the certifications were false. I said I believed evidence should answer that. By noon, the bank had frozen the unused portion of Garrett's credit line and scheduled an audit. That review began before I ended the call. I canceled the monthly transfer. Claire had been sending Serena for Evelyn's household expenses. That money was not actually for Evelyn. Claire paid her mother's bills directly. The transfer covered Garrett's dock payroll, Chase's sailing academy, and Serena's country club dues. Serena had renamed Dependency Family Support, and Forgotten Support could end. I did not touch Evelyn's care. I increased it. I arranged for a nurse to visit twice a week and hired a driver for appointments. Garrett had used his mother as the emotional reason we could never confront him. I removed that excuse before removing anything else. No consequence would be purchased with an old woman's comfort. Before ending the call, I instructed Marisol to preserve payroll records, vendor contracts, fuel receipts, and every maintenance invoice from the previous 5 years. Garrett had always relied on confusion between family favors and business obligations. From that morning forward, nothing would remain informal. Every dollar would have a date, a purpose, and a person responsible for explaining it. Monday passed without a call from Garrett. Tuesday passed too. I went to work, reviewed warehouse temperatures, negotiated a fuel contract, and helped Noah repair a lawnmower after dinner. Ordinary life continued. That is the part people miss about consequences. The person delivering them can still pack lunches and answer emails while they move. On Wednesday morning, Evelyn called me. Her voice was weak but clear. She asked whether Noah had stolen the brooch. I said no and told her I had proof. She began crying before I finished describing the video. Not loud crying. The exhausted kind that comes when suspicion has been forced into a place where love used to sit. She asked why Serena would do it. I told her I did not yet know. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. Then she said Garrett had been pressuring her to revise her estate plan. Her river house and a small investment account were divided equally between Claire and Garrett, with educational gifts for all grandchildren, including Noah. Garrett wanted Noah removed. He argued that adopted children already received government benefits and should not dilute blood inheritance. Evelyn refused. 2 weeks before the birthday, Garrett brought papers prepared by a lawyer she did not know. She sent him away. Suddenly, the brooch was no longer only cruelty. It was strategy. If Noah appeared to steal from Evelyn, Garrett could pressure her to exclude him, and perhaps Claire as well for defending him. The missing brooch created a story: troubled adopted child, naive parents, vulnerable grandmother. Serena had not hidden jewelry in a backpack for anger. She had planted a reason to redirect an estate. Evelyn asked me to come over. Claire and I arrived that afternoon with Renee. We showed her the video on a tablet. She watched Serena crouch beside the backpack, then asked to see it again. Her face changed from grief to a calm I recognized. It was the same calm Claire wore before disciplining an entire classroom. Renee explained that the footage, witness statements, and Chase's potential testimony could support charges for evidence tampering, theft, and conspiracy. Evelyn listened without interrupting. Then she asked Renee to prepare a new estate plan and a separate statement describing Garrett's pressure. She did not remove him entirely. What she chose was more precise. The river house would enter a trust for all grandchildren, but no parent could control a child's share. Noah and Ruby would have equal rights with Chase and the other cousins. Garrett's portion of the investment account would be reduced by every documented dollar Blue Heron had spent covering his business obligations. Accuracy replaced revenge. Evelyn also appointed Claire and me as co-trustees. Garrett had spent years treating me like an outsider. Now every dollar he hoped to influence would require the signature of the man he had shoved for protecting a child. I did not smile when Renee read that clause, but Claire noticed I stopped rubbing my shoulder. By Thursday, Serena began calling Claire from unfamiliar numbers. She alternated between anger and concern. First, Noah had misunderstood. Then Chase had lied. Then the camera angle was misleading. Finally, she said she had only moved the brooch because she feared Evelyn would lose it. Each explanation collapsed under the next. Claire answered once. Serena called me vindictive, accused me of using money to control the family, and demanded that Claire restore the Marina support before payroll failed. Claire let her finish. Then she said, "It was never my money, Serena." The line went silent. Claire listened until the accusations finally exhausted themselves. Claire told her everything. Blue Heron belonged to me. The land docks, fuel tanks, restaurant building repair advances, and emergency transfers came from my companies. Claire had been the messenger because I wanted peace. Garrett had spent 12 years insulting the man whose signature kept Harbor Light open. Every quiet rescue had carried my authorization, not hers. Serena apparently whispered Garrett said the property was family-owned. Claire answered, "It is. You just never bothered to learn which member of the family owned it." Then she told Serena the security footage had been preserved and Evelyn was changing her estate documents. Serena hung up without another word. For once, the truth required no further explanation. That evening, Garrett called me. His voice held none of its usual amusement. He said we needed to meet privately before lawyers and banks turned a family problem into something permanent. I told him the permanent part began when he called my son a criminal in front of 30 people. He said Serena had made a mistake under pressure. I asked what pressure required stealing from his mother and framing a child. Garrett avoided the question. Instead, he asked whether payroll would clear Friday. That told me exactly which loss frightened him most. Not his mother's trust. Not Noah's pain. Payroll. I told him employees would be paid because Blue Heron's emergency reserve would cover one final cycle directly. After that, Harbor Light would have to operate on its actual revenue. Garrett accused me of trying to take the Marina. I reminded him I already owned the Marina. What I was taking away was the illusion that he did. I also asked Marisol to speak privately with the dock crews and restaurant manager. None of them needed to fear losing a paycheck because their owner had mistaken fraud for leadership. Several had families, medical bills, and children starting school. Protecting Noah did not require turning innocent workers into collateral damage, no matter how satisfying Garrett imagined his own importance to be. He became quiet, then suggested dinner on Saturday at a neutral place. He wanted Claire present and said Serena would apologize to Noah afterward. I knew he was not inviting us to apologize. He needed the bank review, stop the lease subsidies restored, and Evelyn's estate unchanged. Still, I agreed. Saturday evening, Claire and I drove to a seafood restaurant overlooking Shem Creek. We arrived early and chose a table near the windows. Fishing boats moved through the water beneath strings of dock lights. It was a beautiful place to discuss ugly things, which was probably why Serena chose it. Claire wore navy and carried no purse, only her phone and the folder Renee had prepared. She had been quiet all afternoon. Not frightened. Finished. There is a difference. I held her hand across the table, and she squeezed once, the same signal we used during Noah's adoption hearing, when neither of us trusted our voices. Garrett and Serena arrived 14 minutes late. Garrett wore a blazer over an open-collar shirt. Serena's eyes were swollen, but her makeup was perfect. They looked like people who had rehearsed sorrow and expected the performance to purchase mercy. Garrett offered his hand. I left mine on the table. Neither of them looked toward the water. They ordered wine. Claire ordered tea. I ordered dinner because consequences have never damaged my appetite. For 5 minutes, Garrett discussed traffic, the Marina weather forecast, and Evelyn's blood pressure, as though the four of us had gathered for ordinary family business. Then Serena placed both hands around her glass and began. She said the birthday had become chaotic. She said she found the brooch on the hallway floor and slipped it into Noah's bag temporarily because she feared one of the younger children would swallow it. She planned to retrieve it later, but Garrett discovered it first. The story was so absurd, Claire actually looked toward the water. I asked why Serena had told everyone Noah was near Evelyn's room before anyone searched his bag. She said she was confused. I asked why Garrett immediately mentioned foster care. He said emotions were high. I asked why Chase looked frightened before the brooch fell. Neither of them answered. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Garrett leaned forward and changed strategy. He apologized for shoving me. Not for the accusation. Not for Noah. For the shove. He said 2 proud men had allowed a misunderstanding to become physical. Then he suggested we withdraw all complaints, restore the Marina funding, and let Evelyn's original estate plan remain untouched. There it is, Claire said. Garrett looked at her. What? She opened Renee's folder and removed a still image from the security footage. Serena's hand was inside Noah's backpack. Beneath it sat a copy of Evelyn's statement describing the estate pressure. Claire placed both pages between the wine glasses. The photograph faced them like an independent witness. You did not come here to repair this family, Claire said. You came to repair your access. Serena's mouth tightened. Garrett said the camera proved nothing. I told him Chase had requested to speak with Evelyn that morning. His face changed before Serena's did. Garrett's posture changed as soon as Claire said it. Chase had arrived at the river house on his bicycle, while Claire and I were there. He was shaking. He admitted Serena had told him to say he saw Noah acting suspiciously. Garrett promised him a new fishing boat if Evelyn removed Noah from the trust and increased Chase's future share. The boy said he never knew Serena would plant the brooch until he saw her beside the backpack. He stayed silent because Garrett warned that telling the truth would destroy the Marina and make employees lose their jobs. A 15-year-old had been ordered to carry the moral weight of 2 adults' fraud. Serena began crying. This time I believed the tears. Real emotion does not make the reason honorable. She said Garrett's debts were worse than anyone understood. Harbor Light owed vendors, the bank tax authorities, and 2 private lenders. If Evelyn's estate remained divided, Garrett would eventually lose everything his father built. I asked whether that justified sacrificing Noah's name. Garrett answered before she could. He would have recovered, he said. Kids recover from rumors. Claire went completely still. I had seen that stillness once before when a school administrator dismissed a student's harassment as teasing. Someone was about to learn the difference between calm and softness. Noah spent 2 years being moved between adults who promised he could stay, Claire said. You used that history as proof he could not be trusted. You did not spread a rumor. You reached into the oldest wound a child carries and used it as a business tool. Garrett looked away first. I placed a second folder on the table. It contained the preliminary results of the bank audit. Garrett had overstated Marina revenue, concealed tax liens, and submitted forged vendor confirmations. Worse, 3 repair invoices billed to Blue Heron described work that had never occurred. The payments went to a shell company registered to Serena's cousin. Garrett stared at the pages and accused me of spying. I told him audits are not spying when the borrower signs an agreement allowing them. He had signed every certification while believing someone else would quietly cover the gaps. The bank had now accelerated the equipment loan and referred the forged records to investigators. Then I gave him the lease notice. Harbor Light's lease prohibited fraud against the landlord, unauthorized liens, and deliberate misrepresentation to lenders. All 3 had occurred. Blue Heron would terminate Garrett's operating rights in 30 days. The Marina would remain open under professional management, and every innocent employee would be offered continued employment. Garrett's face went pale. He said the Marina carried his family name. I reminded him it carried a name on a sign. The deed carried mine. He said his father would be ashamed of me. Evelyn's voice came from behind him before I could answer. That distinction had apparently never occurred to him. She had arrived with Renee and Chase. We had not planned theater. Evelyn insisted on attending after hearing Chase's confession. The restaurant manager arranged a nearby table until she was ready. She walked slowly with a cane, but every person at our table stood when she approached. Chase had insisted she hear everything with her own ears. My husband would be ashamed of you, Evelyn told Garrett. Her voice was not loud yet, it seemed to clear the room around us. Daniel saved that Marina because I asked Claire to protect your pride. You turned his kindness into evidence that he was beneath you. Garrett could not look at her. Evelyn placed the emerald brooch on the table. She said Garrett would receive no direct control over her estate. His adjusted share would be placed in a protected trust accessible only for verified medical needs and basic housing after his debts were resolved. The grandchildren's shares would remain equal. Noah's name would remain exactly where it belonged. Garrett whispered, "Mom, please." Evelyn answered that he had asked her to choose blood over character. "So I did," she said. "I chose the child who behaved like family." Noah was not present, but I carried that sentence home for him. Garrett lowered his head as though the room had tilted. Serena reached for Chase. He stepped beside his grandmother instead. That movement broke something in her face. He said he would give a statement to Renee and the investigators. He also asked whether he could apologize to Noah directly without his parents in the room. I told him the choice would belong to Noah. Garrett turned back to me and offered everything he believed I wanted. A public apology, repayment schedule, ownership percentage, even his resignation from daily operations if I restored the lease. I listened until he finished. Then I told him this was not a negotiation because trust was not an asset he could refinance. You thought Noah's place in this family could be reduced to paperwork, I said. Now paperwork is the only thing keeping you from the Marina. Garrett closed his eyes. For the first time since I met him, he looked like a man standing inside the reality his confidence had postponed. Claire stood and kissed Evelyn's cheek. I paid for our meals and Evelyn's, but not Garrett's or Serena's. That detail later made Ruby laugh for 3 straight minutes. We left them at the table with 2 untouched glasses of wine, a termination notice, and no remaining version of the story where they were victims. On the drive home, Claire cried. Not because she regretted the consequences. She was grieving the brother she had spent 19 years believing might someday become kinder. I kept one hand on the wheel and one over hers. Revenge stories rarely mention grief, but every boundary closes around something we once hoped would change. The legal process moved without drama. Garrett pleaded guilty to bank fraud and filing false financial statements. The shove became a misdemeanor assault charge supported by witnesses and medical records. Serena accepted charges for theft, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. Both received probation conditions, restitution orders, and community service while the financial case continued. Harbor Light never closed. Blue Heron hired Marisol as interim director, retained every employee who wanted to stay, and rebuilt the damaged vendor relationships. Within 8 months, the marina became profitable for the first time in years. We removed Garrett's oversized portrait from the restaurant lobby and replaced it with photographs of the original dock workers. The restitution payments came from the sale of Garrett's boat, 2 luxury vehicles, and the remaining assets of his shell company. They did not make Blue Heron whole, and they could not restore Noah's dignity at that birthday party. Money could document accountability, but it could not substitute for it. The apology, if it ever became real, would have to cost Garrett something pride could not reimburse. Garrett and Serena moved into a rented townhouse outside Somerville. Evelyn did not celebrate their fall. Neither did I. She spoke with Garrett through a family counselor and kept strict limits. Love remained, but access changed. That distinction saved her from being pulled into every new emergency he created. She refused to confuse compassion with another blank check. Chase met Noah at our house 2 months later. He brought no parents and no rehearsed speech. He admitted he had repeated cruel things because his father praised him whenever he made Noah feel smaller. He said he saw Serena plant the brooch and hated himself for staying silent. Noah agreed only after Claire promised he could end the meeting any time. Noah listened with his hands in his pockets. Then he said forgiveness was possible, but friendship would take longer. Chase nodded. They did not hug. They repaired an old outboard motor in the garage for 3 hours, which for boys like them said more than a dramatic embrace ever could. At Christmas, Evelyn gave each grandchild a small wooden box. Noah's contained a copy of the new trust page with his name beside the others, and the emerald brooch wrapped in blue velvet. He tried to return it. Evelyn closed his fingers around the box and said jewelry should belong to someone who understood what it could never prove. Noah later mounted the brooch inside a shadow frame beside his first handwritten Noah cross. Underneath, he placed a small brass plate that read, "Belonging is a promise kept." I pretended the dust in my office made my eyes water. Ruby told everyone I was lying. The 2 pieces belonged together more honestly than any family portrait. A year after the birthday, we held Evelyn's celebration at the River House again. Garrett and Serena were not invited. Chase came with a counselor-approved family friend. The music played oysters roasted, and nobody searched anyone's bag. Ordinary joy returned slowly, which made it feel earned. Evelyn requested exactly that kind of uncomplicated afternoon. Near sunset, Noah stood beside me at the dock. He asked whether I had saved the marina to punish Garrett. I told him no. I saved the employees because they had not framed him. I removed Garrett because he had. Justice, I explained, should know the difference between the building and the person who misused it. Then he asked whether I had ever regretted adopting him because of what the family did. I turned toward him. Son, adopting you is the reason I finally learned which people deserve the word family. He looked down at the water, smiled, and bumped his shoulder gently against mine. The answer had been waiting in me for years. For 19 years, I thought keeping peace meant absorbing disrespect so Claire would never have to choose between her husband and her brother. I was wrong. Silence did not protect my family. It financed the people harming it. The moment Garrett framed my son, the account closed. Peace without protection had only made cruelty cheaper. My name is Daniel Cross. I am 51 years old. I own a logistics company, a marina property, and a house full of loud opinions. None of those things make me a father. What makes me a father is that when someone tried to rewrite my son's place in our family, I made the truth more permanent than their lie. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, share it, and tell me where you are listening from. Remember this: blood can introduce people, money can connect them, and silence can keep them in the same room. But family is built by the people who protect your name when destroying it would benefit them.